Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max.
Welcome, everyone. We are the Geek Patrol, and our microphones don't have a stun setting. I'm Joe Thorderson, here with my friends Brandon Olmstead and Alan Gilbreth and Allie Diggs and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. Sorry, I called you Allie out of habit. Alyssa Diggs.
She's professional.
It's just like my dad.
You guys, sometimes people overuse the word epic, but today it's not an exaggeration. If somebody's listening to this via podcast, they're looking at the clock and going, wow, this is a long episode of Geek Tank Radio. And it's not every day that you get to have a bucket list event in your life, but I had that this week.
I wake up every morning, or actually every afternoon. So yeah, I do. I live.
That's your okay, whatever.
Dude, I live to plague humanity another day.
Okay. Well, later in the show, I am so excited about this. Actually, Max and I had a in-depth interview with radio legend Phil Hendrie. He's in the next few months, he might be inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. But cool. What an interesting conversation, wide-ranging, and I've been a fan of his for 25 years, so I'm really excited about that. But something that a lot of people are not a fan of these days, I guess, is HBO Max. Brandon, what is going on? A lot of trouble.
Well,
we've heard that.
So,
how many times over the last 5 years have we said that?
We've been having issues with Max for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But
who, me?
Not you.
Yeah.
You're cool.
Clarify.
We're talking about HBO Max. Max, the streaming service for Warner Brothers Discovery. And the latest group of folks who have said, nope, we're walking away from it. They've started a streaming boycott. They were trending number 1 on Twitter and number 2 with Fire David Zaslav as the
which you've been calling
trending
for
topic. I've been calling for his
years.
head for years.
Yeah.
I mean, since the moment he got in charge, I was like, he's gone. He needs to be gone. Anyways, one of the most prominently rated shows on HBO Max was Our Flags Mean Death.
That's a great title.
And what's really important about it, especially this month, being Pride, is it has a lot of queer representation. It is the second highest streamed show that HBO Max has, and they just canceled it.
Is it one of these where, because we keep hearing about these projects that get canceled, even if they're projects people want because there's some line item where it's like they get a tax write-off or they get...
Well, no. It's the problem is this show's already aired 2 seasons. It's not even a situation where they're, hey, we can get more profit if we get rid of this. But they've actually gone kind of out of their way lately to cancel and get rid of shows that were doing very well, that are what you would be referred to, what your crazy people refer to as the DEI representation, which basically means that they have something besides old white men or old straight white men.
Okay.
And they've gotten rid of a lot of shows that were doing really well, that people were enjoying, not only because of the content, but also because of the representation. And it's almost like David Zaslav has decided that on top of everything else he's getting rid of just so he can get a tax break, he's now going, you know what? I don't understand that show. I'm going to get rid of it, and I'm going to replace it with Hamster Wars, which is a show run by 2 of the reality show people that he had working Discovery on one of the house shows.
Wait, I have sort of I don't know if this is a dumb question, but I'm going to dare ask it. Why would you... Okay, you're talking about canceling. Okay, they made a full movie of Batgirl.
Right.
They made a full movie of the Coyote. They made full productions of something... Right. And then canceled it. Well, why did you make it in the first place?
Well,
did the world change so much between the time you made it and
no? And
then why would you make? I don't get why you make something only to cancel it.
Because it's like Batgirl was being made originally for Max. Zaslav decided movies need to have theatrical releases, and in order to up that production level to get a theatrical release, you were going to have to put a lot more money into it. And we saw the same thing with Blue Beetle. It is streaming service quality effects. I love the movie, and
it wasn't really ready for the theaters.
It wasn't designed for theaters.
Yeah.
Batgirl wasn't designed for the theaters. But and I'm sorry, Coyote versus Acme, totally designed for the theaters, had amazing test screenings, and when they decided to shelve it, and all of a sudden you had Congress looking into possible FCC violations, They're like, oh, well, we'll shop it around. They put a price tag on it, a non-negotiable price tag on it, which was over twice what they were going to get from their tax break for shelving it. If Netflix wanted it, Paramount wanted it. Paramount was even going to not only put it on their streaming service, but give it a shared revenue theatrical release. So, WBD was going to get money on top of the money they paid them for it.
Sorry.
And because it wasn't what they, the price tag that they were willing to go with right then and there, it's going to go away.
Okay.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The only reason that the last Space Jam didn't do good is because we didn't care about LeBron stepping into Michael Jordan's shoes. We really didn't.
Brandon, sometimes you have to explain this stuff to me, to quote Michael Scott, like I'm a 5-year-old. Here's what I'm wondering.
All right.
Okay, so Wile E. Coyote, the Coyote versus Acme. Let's just put a number. I don't know, $50 million. Okay, but hold on. So to sell it to Paramount, they really don't want to sell it to Paramount, so they just put such a huge price on it that, okay, sure, you can either pay me this or they're not going to buy it.
They were gonna get a $30 million tax break.
Okay.
They wanted between $75 and $80 million to shop it for someone to pick it up, and then and then wanting more money on top of that for anything like I said with the the ad revenue or the whatnot from theatrical release, and it was non-negotiable. You couldn't say, well, what if I gave you this and then we did this on the back end? No, if you did not, it was an empty gesture. They never wanted to sell it.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering.
Right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if they had sold it for, say, 35, 45 million, and Paramount was going to do a theatrical release and share the revenue with Warner Brothers, they would have made a lot more money off of it. But
they would have made fans happy, which is why is that not a consideration?
That money would have gone into the company and not into Zaslav's bonus. He has been cutting, but he is also the most highest paid CEO of anybody who's on streaming.
Is he the Lex Luthor of Hollywood?
No, because Lex Luthor has the charisma that you almost want to follow him sometimes.
Ouch. All right.
He's the Lindsey Graham.
Brandon doesn't pull any punches. And we're going to continue the brutal assault when we come back here on Geek Tank Radio.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. Did someone order a life-size statue of Optimus Prime? The Geek Patrol is back.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Brandon Olmsted and Alan Gilbreth and Alyssa Diggs and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. And just an observation. One thing that I enjoy about being on Geek Tank Radio, you guys, is I learn as the show unfolds. I mean, and you guys make me think about stuff. And one thing I was reflecting on during the break.
We are happy to stimulate your brain on a Sunday morning.
Well, I'm just telling you, it's like, because I just, Alyssa, when, back in our day, and I hate to sound that way, but man, we didn't know all these behind the scenes maneuverings. We didn't know all the ins and outs and the drama going on in the studios to a degree. Now, even the average geek is so well informed. I think there's good things about it, but obviously now it's working against them in a way. I mean, look at this David Zaslav. He's a hated guy, right?
Oh,
I mean,
it's working against him, but I don't really care about him. So, I think it's good. I think they should be held accountable for their dishonesty.
I completely agree.
It's unusual though, but I mean, I'm just saying. But Brandon, you said so. But there's a boycott, and when would that have happened? Without an informed public. I guess,
right,
so.
right. It's like all most people would know is all of a sudden it's like, hey, it's time for my show to come back, and boom, my show's not there anymore. Oh, I guess they canceled it. Back in those days, you didn't get the what the ratings were. Nielsen had the ratings. They were the only people who did that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you didn't know if something was other than they say a Nielsen approved sitcom or something like that. You saw it in the TV guide, but that was about it. As far as the information that they gave to the general public. Nowadays, while we still can't get the total streaming numbers, sometimes we know too much way too in advance. Like when they tell you, it's like, hey, so-and-so has signed on for this movie and they're going to play this role, even though that character doesn't show up until the very end. It's like with Harry Styles playing Eros in the Eternals.
Yeah.
We knew he was in the movie 6 months before the movie came out. He doesn't show up until the stinger at the very end.
Yeah.
So,
I guess I'm wondering too. Once again, you're making me think about something. This interconnected. We have YouTube channels dedicated to these conversations. Right. We have a show like ours. We have we have the internet, and I just okay. Here's what I'm thinking about. Andor. No, here's what I'm thinking. Okay, Andor. Right. Perfect example. That is hands down one of not only my favorite Star Wars projects, but is probably one of my favorite shows ever written.
Right.
Well, Brandon, we're watching this. We're watching the season, and then you're telling me that the ratings are pretty low for Andor.
They were. They started off really. People were like, I don't know about this, but
in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is the best show ever. Surely millions of people are enjoying it with me, but maybe not.
And here's the thing: if it hadn't been for word of mouth coming into that second story arc, all of a sudden people were like, "No, dude, you got to check out Andor." People started jumping on it. The numbers went up. They started talking about how great it was doing. The Acolyte just gave Disney what they thought think of as the best opening of any of their streaming services in a while, especially Star Wars related. And this is because it's also one of the first ones that has had mass marketing across everything. It's not just those of us on the internet know about it. Those of us who don't. Dude, I watch General Hospital religiously, and there was an Acolyte commercial on between segments of General Hospital. Mm-hmm. So they were even getting the stay-at-home mom or the poor guy who is laid off and laid up.
I guess what I was thinking about how this affects things, though, is like if you're just the casual observer and you're scrolling the internet and you're like, oh, well, Andor, this show doesn't have much traffic, so I'm not going to waste my time with it. And how many really good projects do we miss out? Maybe because, there's many projects that weren't box office successes, but they grow. They become cult classics.
There's so many shows that Netflix has cut loose that honestly they didn't. It's like it's on their service. They got it didn't work out. They canceled it. People didn't even know it existed because there's so much content on top of it. So you don't have someone going, man, this One Day at a Time remake is really good, and it was really good. Yeah, especially for someone who watched reruns of the original show. Yeah, but yeah, it's just sometimes there's just too much content.
Yeah.
Well, we do have an embarrassment of riches.
Yes.
I was just looking at the top things going on at Netflix right now.
Right.
And
Atlas.
There's a lot of anime.
Yeah.
There's a lot of feature-length name studios. And this was just the top 100 list. This didn't say the other 10,000 things they had listed. But then you're looking at some other shows like Bridgerton, and in the top 10, Bridgerton is 7 of the top 10.
That's crazy.
Season 3 is number 1 because that's what's out, followed by Season 2 because people aren't done with that.
Oh, wow.
And Season 1 is still in the top 10.
Yeah, people are rewatching from the start.
And Queen Charlotte is probably the best one that they did.
Yeah.
Well, Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, is number 10.
Yeah.
So Bridgerton is actually 4 out of the top 10 things going on at Netflix right now. There's so much content, and certain things are rising to the top, but others are just getting nixed. And even Netflix has their 3-season curse.
Oh, right. Yeah, when you get to season
But
3.
they have so much content, I understand that.
Yeah.
It's
a lot to keep up with.
If we all got together and said, we're going to do the Geek Tank show, and Netflix says you're picked up we'll pick you up, I would plan on 3 seasons. Because, because it's kind of Netflix goes, I got 30,000 more people applying for the same spot.
Yeah.
But it explains a lot when you're saying all these dynamics behind the scenes, Brandon, why sometimes good projects get canceled, and it's a shame for us, But it is a lot to navigate. Alan said, there's way too much content.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
Brown coats are a menace.
I just had to throw it out there.
I love Firefly, but the fans are what ruined Firefly for me.
I will say it's confusing as a consumer because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? If I like the show, I talk about it, I do enough. you're still going to cancel it. So what? As a consumer, how am I supposed to keep the things I like on the TV?
I don't know. Create a YouTube page, I guess. Al. And yeah, just sing the praises.
Fire
from
David
the,
Zaslow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll continue the conversation when we come back here on Geek Tank Radio.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. The Geek Patrol is back.
And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio,
Every
everybody.
time I look in the mirror, that's what I say.
Gosh.
Wow. We just got
That's
dark.
not healthy. Listen, I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Brandon Olmstead and Alan Gilbreth and the very dark Alyssa Diggs and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And it's funny, you never know. You know, I guess maybe someday we will keep the microphones on just for behind-the-scenes content. But somehow we really got into an in-depth conversation about Bridgerton. I asked a very innocent question because I don't watch the show.
Right.
All of you guys have very strong feelings about it. But, well, as Alan pointed out, it's the number, 1, 2, 3? Seasons 1, 2, and 3 are all top rated on Netflix.
Well, let's see.
So.
Let's just run through Netflix top right now this weekend.
Okay.
Dancing with the Devil.
I need to watch that.
I don't know what that is.
The big
It's a
hot one
documentary.
right now. It is the TikTok cult. Dancing for the Devil.
The 7M.
The 7M. Yeah.
Robert Chin scandal.
Yep.
Okay.
Bridgerton season 3.
Yeah.
And only the first half of season 3 is out. The second half comes out next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as Allie pointed out, it is definitely female oriented.
Yeah.
It is very sexy. It is very adult. Don't think you're going to watch this with your 8-year-old.
Do
Okay.
not. Do not.
And I will say that they're incredibly well dressed.
Yes.
This is like, a fashion sense, run amok. Tires, season 1. Eric,
So bad.
the limited series. A surprise one to me. I'm actually surprised this one got this much traffic. Jurassic World Chaos Theory.
Dude, their Jurassic Park animated series that led up to this one, Camp Crustacean,
Yeah.
it was so good. And literally, spoiler alert, if you love Jenna Ortega's character in Camp Crustacean, you definitely need to watch the first episode of Chaos Theory.
Oh,
Well, there
okay.
you go. Again, I was a little surprised that something as mainstream as Jurassic was that hot. The one that's cracking me up is, of course, the expose on Ashley Madison. And I guess it's so popular because everybody's still trying to see if their name pops up. Sex, Lies, and Scandal. And they love how they say it's season 1.
Right.
Oh, yeah, they got a lot of material to cover.
Well, I mean, when those cases came to light, that went on for 3 or 4 years in and of itself.
Well, and the fact that it was a hack exposed.
Yeah.
It was a hijacked website, and either pay the ransom or we're throwing you on the internet.
They're not going to do that.
And they threw them on the internet.
Yep.
So then, of course, we get to your heavy hitters. Bridgerton season 1, followed only by Bridgerton season 2, followed by Your Honor. Somebody slipped one in here in between the Bridgerton invasion.
Your Honor's on Netflix now?
Yes.
It just dropped
That
a little
show's
while ago.
incredible. One of my favorite shows of all time. I highly recommend Your Honor. It's incredible. Sorry.
Yeah, but
Continue.
you have a mad on for Bryan Cranston.
I do. I love him. He's
It's
so
okay.
talented.
Your Honor is there, and I'm sorry, the dad from Malcolm in the Middle cannot be stopped.
He
is a
a
living
talent.
force. He has
Yes.
actually become one of our best actors
for sure.
in anything. Because he
He's
can
a
play,
good comedian, too.
He can
He's-
play dopey
he's
dad.
funny.
He can be a stand-up comedian, and he can be scary AF.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say. And rounding it out, of course, a Bridgerton story, Queen Charlotte.
Nice.
So welcome to what apparently is hot, and apparently what is hot is sexy shows made for women.
You're making me think of something else, Alan. Man, my brain is expanding this show. But we
I
have
just wish it could expand our runtime.
we have HBO Max, Disney Plus. We have all these studio. Okay, it seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, that Hulu and Netflix seem to be if you're an international creator, if you have a production studio in Brazil or whatever, you have more of a shot of getting on Netflix and Hulu, right, than you do. And maybe that's why we're seeing so much anime and some things like that. So they seem to have a more of an international flavor.
And what's really sad is that Hulu is becoming way more exclusive to what gets on there. So your indie guys aren't going to be able to use that avenue much anymore.
Is
'Cause-
Netflix
well,
really the main place to go if you're
Netflix
trying to
is
do
the go,
something?
And there's a few smaller streaming services out there. Tubi, everything's powered by ads, so it's free.
Yeah, Tubi's great.
If you just like old school procedurals and sitcoms and movies and everything else, Freevee is also good. It's Amazon's free service.
I don't know, because I was just thinking of all the show. I don't know if you guys watch that show Lupin. It's in French. It's really good. It's got it's kind of a Ocean's 11 type of show. It's really good. And Max and I were watching a Russian superhero movie. It wasn't that great. I hate to say it, but I mean,
Hey,
there's
you can only
things
have-
from around the world on Netflix.
You can only have so many men who turn into bears.
Okay, I don't remember that one.
Well, see, here's kind of, I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm going to pick on Henry Cavill with Argyle for a moment.
Oh my God.
Henry Cavill, all right, we all know him as Superman, and we all know the guy's, he's built like a freight train. He worked really hard. He's like a Hugh Jackman. He really believes in putting in the work. He's not CGI'd to look like that. He really looks like that.
He gets in shape.
Hugh Jackman, and several others, man, you guys put in the work.
Chris Hemsworth has back abs.
Oh my gosh!
A great place for abs.
But you got to admire these actors and actresses that are playing these extreme roles, that are really putting in the extreme work. They're not expecting the computer to save them. And Argyle just wasn't a U.S. show. It wasn't made for a U.S. market. However, the minute it quit trying to be in the U.S. and went streaming, now suddenly it's put money in the coffers. It's paid off production.
All right.
Argyle's a hit.
So you know what the feel you get from Argyle is? Ensemble version of the Avengers. And I don't mean Marvel's Avengers. I mean BBC's Avengers.
Yep, the BBC,
Cute.
Emma Peel, the whole bit.
Mr. Steed. Oh,
Well,
I can watch those shows for like ever, and never stop. Them, and then I go watch MASH to get my US in.
Yeah.
all right, well,
MASH.
you watch
Classic.
MASH, but see, you've also seen Gentlemanly Warfare.
Yes.
And
So good.
it is not an American movie, is it?
No.
It is not designed for, as they love to say, the popcorn munching American public.
It's really not.
And I'm looking at this top list here for Netflix, and I'm not really seeing anything on here except maybe Jurassic World
Yeah.
that is honestly geared towards the big U.S. market.
Okay, very interesting. Interesting times. You're listening to Geek Tank Radio. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. The Geek Patrol is back.
Hey, we've done heroic things too.
Yeah, in the third season, I kissed Shatner.
And welcome back to
Very heroic.
Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my friends Brandon Olmstead and Alan Gilbreth and Alyssa Diggs and our buddy Max over there behind the glass. And I hope the listeners and my fellow hosts here will indulge me. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Max and I don't know if this is a bucket list item for you, Max, but this was definitely a bucket list for me. Got to interview Phil Hendrie this week, and it was a pretty in-depth. There was no clock. We just talked, and when the conversation was over, we ended, and it was well
an hour
over
later.
hour. Yeah, like an hour and 15 minutes later. But there's probably people, especially in your generation, Allie, that may not know who Phil Hendrie is. And I've said his name incorrectly for years till I actually Googled it, but it's not Henry, it's Hendrie, Hendrie. There's a new documentary about him that just came out that's really interesting. And he's also been nominated for the Radio Hall of Fame, which in my opinion should have happened like 20 years ago. But Max, you're a fan of Phil Hendrie.
Although my favorite character is a character that you morally object to, and that's a man by the name of Herb Sewell.
Well, I hope you morally object to him too.
Oh, I object to him
he's
too,
a
but
creep and a
he's
pervert
great.
and a weirdo, but he's funny. but so Allie, if you can picture this now, his show has evolved over the years, but the big thing is Phil Hendrie he's really good at impersonating people. He's very good at improv. And he's very good at unfolding stories. And so his show, if you can imagine this, basically back in the day, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, he was on late night, so he got away with a little more. You know, he usually came on around here before Art Bell came on, and he would basically he would set forth some really ridiculous premise, but not so ridiculous that it seemed unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of his characters, Ted Bell, who's this big rich guy, back in 2002, his premise was Ted Bell was calling in because he thinks that if you have a certain amount of money, you should be able to you don't have to get checked at the airport. You can just basically show him your bank account and you go to the front of the line. And he was a real elitist. And then what happens is people call in and they're really mad and they go at it. Well, what you realize later is Phil Hendrie is doing all the voices. Yeah. So Phil Hendrie plays the good guy. He's like, well, I agree with my caller here. And then he suddenly jumps onto the phone. It's really interesting to watch him do it. They have a phone hooked into the board, and Ted Bell is suddenly on the phone and going, well, this caller's a moron. He does or whatever. I can't tell you how funny it is, though. It's really good.
Yeah.
But Max, could you just play it? Because I feel like we have a sound clip that kind of illustrates this. Let me set it up real quick. His program director, they were constantly butting heads. His program director was a guy named David G. Hall, and this is another made-up character of his. Right. And he was Phil Hendrie was trying to read a love letter to his wife on Valentine's Day, but meanwhile, David G. Hall was remodeling the office next door because he was getting Programmer of the Year, and it was disrupting the whole show. And one of the callers called in and got really upset. But go ahead, Max, hit it.
So that's Sylvia. I can't hear anything because of these guys working.
I know, but he's doing it deliberately. He's a dog.
David, why don't you tell these guys to knock the work off, okay?
Phil.
That old bag you're talking to ain't worth my time. Yes, ma'am.
You could work with an animal like that. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think you're right.
He is an animal. He's not a human being. I wish I was there. You know what I could do to him?
What's that?
I could just go right into his face and blow his teeth out.
Well, that's a pretty violent thing.
What did she say? Violent, but that's how I feel about him. I despise that man.
What did you say, lady?
Shut your mouth, you pig.
Smile when you say that.
Pig. I dare you to come down here. I'll break your neck.
Smile when you say that to me.
You ugly pig.
When did Moses give you that Valentine, by the way?
All right, cut it, Max. But anyway, That's just an example. It was so funny. I've actually almost hyperventilated listening to a show sometimes, but I don't know how he pulled it off because part of the audience is fooled, and they're fooled to the point where they'll call in and accept the premise while the other half is in on the jokes. I guess what I can't figure out is how do you get an advertiser to even say yes to that? You know what I mean? It's like
there's an advertiser for everything.
I guess so.
Dude, have you seen how many horrible podcasts are sponsored by LifeLock?
Yeah. Well, hey, now wait a minute. X that out, Max. We might be getting but anyway, no,
they'll still sponsor us too.
No, but what I mean was but Allie, he was doing both of those voices. And
That's
then the callers
crazy.
calling.
Yeah.
I don't know how he did it that quick cuz he's literally holding a phone that I guess is plugged into the board, and none of it is scripted. It's all on the fly. He's also, I think, working the controls, making the sound effects and everything.
Because his producer is just him. He has a producer named Bud, and which is him. Explain the origin of how he got his voice. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, Bud, his producer, drove his Harley Davidson into an oak tree, and hit himself in the head.
Now he sounds like this, Mr. Hendrie.
Yeah, but it's really funny, and we're gonna visit with him after this, and it's just. The show is hilarious, but it evolves. What's nice about it is the show changes every few years. So now his show today is a podcast, but it's all him. There's no callers. He just does it all himself.
And the thing is that if you don't know him from his radio, he's in everything.
Oh, and he's also a voice
actor. Look at his IMDb.
Futurama.
Futurama.
He recently did guest stints on Call Me Kat, the Mayim Bialik show.
Yeah.
He was one of the guys at the retirement community her mom moved into.
Yeah, he's great. And so, like I said, I've been a fan for years. It was a real honor to be able to talk to him. And like I said, folks, there's a great documentary. I think you can find it on like Apple. Just Google it. It's called Hendrie, Hendrie, and it's we interviewed the filmmaker a couple months ago, Patrick Reynolds, who made it, and it's a really good conversation. It's coming up right after this. It's going to be great. So we're going to be in just a moment transitioning to our digital platform. But it was great, you guys, and thanks for indulging me. And
dude, of course. Look, anytime you have something in your life that just rolls with the world, and it's something you're excited about, we got time for it. Especially if we can, roll it into something for us.
Absolutely,
because ratings are awesome.
So it's coming up, but it's time for us to get out of here. So until next week, we are the Geek Patrol, and I am Joe Thorderson.
I'm Helen Gilbreth.
I'm Maximilian.
I'm Alyssa Diggs.
And I am Brandon Olmstead, waiting for Max to totally Phil Hendrie next week's Tool Talk.
You're listening to Geek Tank Radio on 98.1 The Max. The Geek Patrol is back.
Also, they told me you guys look like dorks.
They look like dorks.
Hey, pretty appropriate, Max. Wasn't Phil on the Futurama there?
Why do you think I chose it?
And we do look like dorks. No getting around it. And welcome back to Geek Tank Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson here with my buddy Max. And on the line, we've got, boy, have I been looking forward to this a long time, Phil Hendrie, radio legend, I dare say, and just inducted to or nominated for the Radio Hall of Fame. He's the subject of the new documentary, Hendrie, by Patrick Reynolds, who we had on the show recently, and Jordan Brady. And Phil, thanks so much for joining us, man. It's great to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
We told before the break, we told our audience a little bit about you, and I was really eager to get into a conversation with you about sort of the nuts and bolts of your show, some of the idiosyncrasies, and more or less, I'm a fan. I listen every day, Phil. So I'll probably have some inside baseball kind of questions for you. So, but I wanted to say, your show is really out of the box, and I'm kind of wondering what that pitch meeting looked like back in the day when you had to actually sell this to somebody. How did you get the networks on board, man?
You're talking about my radio and digital show.
Yeah, I want to start with the radio, then we're going to move up to your your netcast and everything.
Well, I mean, we all got into radio back in the day. You just, going around to radio stations with little tapes. Mine was on a cassette, and it had me reading commercial. I'd never done a radio show before in my life, but I wanted to go into radio. But I spent 16 years, pretty much, Joe, as a disc jockey, reading the commercials and playing the records. And I got into album rock radio in the mid-'70s, and not really stretching the way my modern satirical show was, because I knew my instincts were really weird.
They're different.
I just knew they were weird. I was already kind of tending to do voices, and I would always, in those days, they would step on you if they hired you to play records. They'd kind of step on you if you meandered away. The only cats that could do anything that was outside the box were the morning show guys, show, and that kind of thing, or afternoon driver. If you really just kind of pushed yourself, you could probably work your way in as a personality. But I didn't. I had too many constraints psychologically. And am I talking too much? Do you want to?
No, unpack, man, because
I go on forever, and sometimes they have to sedate me. So
I want longer answers than that.
Okay,
so,
good.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just run my head into a wall and I stop. But I finally, around my late 30s, I said to myself, either you express yourself as an artist, or you're not going to do it. You're going to be a midday host on a beautiful music station for the rest of your life, man. So that's when, in 1990, I made a tape of me doing all these characters, which was always my instinct, talking to them, which was always my instinct, in a very realistic way, which is always my instinct. And I sent them out to every radio station I could think of, every talk station, because I knew as of 1988, talk radio had begun to really flower, and that was where I knew I needed to be. I couldn't stick in a format where you had to play music. So I got a rejection letter from Diane Rem, the great programmer at WCAU in Philadelphia, which is one of the best rejection letters I ever got. She said, "Phil, this is some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard. I can't use it."
Oh, right.
I can't hire you. Yeah. I took that as a compliment because I knew she was at a CBS O&O. And finally, I got hired at a little radio station just up the road from me here in Ventura. And my program director there, Rich Galano, gave me the greatest advice I ever got. He said, just prep your show like you're not going to get one phone call. You know,
that's probably good advice because you never know, right? I mean,
it was phenomenal advice because it allowed me to just boom, just start going in every direction I could think of. And I did that. And that's where it kind of began for me. And I started to experiment. And suddenly I was talking to myself on a telephone. And suddenly people were calling and saying, who's the guy who's talking? I want to talk to that guy. I didn't plan that. I didn't plan.
That's what I wanted to find out because it sounded. I've heard you talk in the past that this sort of grew organically. You didn't map out the entire show. It's sort of like you picked the parts that worked. But once again, just to circle back, at some point you had to sell that idea. Your idea is basically you're fooling half the audience. You're fooling them so, and you're getting them so angry they're calling in, thinking they're talking to a real guest. And while the other half of the audience is in on the gag, that seems like a real tough pitch to an advertiser, man.
It's not half the audience. It's like 99% of your audience knows it's you doing a voice.
Okay.
Only about 2% of the audience ever calls, and only about 1/2 of that percent is completely unaware of what you're doing. But you're looking for cume. As you know, in our business, cume is the number of people that are just tuning in and tuning out in any given 15-minute period. Average quarter hour, the people that stay. So I was looking for all those people that tune in and tune out, that are not paying attention, that are just listening to the radio, getting angry, going, I'm going to call this guy. He sounds like a jackass. That's the guy I was looking for,
Right.
And there's plenty of them. So pitching, it's an interesting question, Joe. In radio, you don't pitch. You just send somebody a tape, man. You just send them your resume and your tape back in those days.
Right.
And so that's what I did. Here's what I do. Do you like it? No. Thank you. See you later. Period. And you just keep sending it around to radio stations. Eventually you get known and people start to call you and ask you, would you like to work for them? Or that they know your work and they put your name up in front of their general manager. And that's kind of what happened to me is I left KVE in Ventura. I auditioned for a gig at WSB in Atlanta. I didn't take the job. I forget whether I didn't take the job or they didn't give it to me because for some reason, but Jim Ashbury at WSB remembered me. And as soon as I left, got canned at KVEN, he hired me in Atlanta. And Jim also, as soon as I got canned in Atlanta, hired me to go to Minneapolis because he was programming at WCCO. Those are 2 heritage radio stations in a row that Phil Hendrie is doing his completely cuckoo show,
Sounds like he stole you, man.
Yeah, and then eventually when I was in Minneapolis, a guy that I worked for in Atlanta, Bob Green, who was the GM, Bob was GM in Miami, Bob said, come on down to Miami. So you make friends, people get to know you, they know the act that you're doing, they know that it's, they want to have it on their station. WID was a great station because it was a personality-driven station. It was all about being funny. It was all about, they didn't want to do politics, they wanted to do life.
Yeah.
And that was my kind of place. So that's kind of how it goes.
I just want to say something, Phil, because we attempt to, with Geek Tank Radio, we don't necessarily want to polarize anybody. I think in this day and age, actually providing something that's funny and uniting and interesting. I mean, I think that's a real valuable thing. It's not just, I think it's not unimportant, man. And I think the service you provide me, I'll tell you, man, I listen every day. I'm a Backstage Pass listener. And I'll tell you this, folks, and Phil's not paying me to say this. I do. It's the best $10 a month I spend. I listen hours every day and I never run out of material. And I will say something else, Phil, your show, as far as I can tell, because I'm kind of a student of your show, it seems to me you change up the format every 4 or 5 years. So, like, depending on my mood, I might listen to a 2010 show or I listen to your 90s stuff or whatever. And I appreciate that, man. There's a lot of variety.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, you don't want to get bored. And because I'm my own boss, as you are, Joe, I can do that. And I kind of force the audience to go with me, and the people that don't like it, I guess they leave. But most people kind of want to go and see where you're headed, and yeah, there was a way I did it when I got out of radio and started the digital show, and then I kind of got bored with that and changed it. And now, like today's show is a guy named Major Elvis Newton. I just had him kick off the show. I wasn't even there.
Right.
I just go into character and say, Mr. Hendrie isn't here because I have some things I want to say.
Yeah, I heard it.
He walked into the studio yesterday wearing a diaper, and then it just goes from there,
He flipped out, too. You had to get, spoilers. I don't want to give it away, but yeah.
But and that show was constructed. I stopped. I went and got coffee. I fed the cat. Then I came back to the studio and kept doing it. Then I stopped, and I went, that's the other beautiful thing about just taping the show. You can almost spend a whole day doing it, and sometimes that's okay.
I wanted to say a couple things as an outside observer. So, like I said, I mean, I watched the Hendrie documentary. Patrick Reynolds, what a good dude. And thanks to Patrick for putting me in touch with you. He's a great guy, really interesting. But I've watched it several times. And one thing that stuck out at me, he showed a clip of you spinning records. And I guess, I don't know, what looks like to me, it was back in the 80s. And you were like, coming up is such and such, whatever it was. You look bored out of your mind if you want to know the truth. Yes. And I was like, and then after you seem to jump into your career, I feel like you're all about risk taking. I've never really heard you take the safe way out during a gag. And did you have some sort of shift in your mindset, like where you're like, no, I'm just going to be authentic and I'm doing what I want to do? So.
Yeah, it happened. And I was at KLSX in those days. I was spinning records. You're right. I was an album rock jock. And I remember back in those days, I swear to God, Joe, I would think this, getting out of my car in the morning and walking to the studio from the parking garage at KLSX on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, thinking, if only I could start my career all over again. If only I could go back to the beginning. And I'll be a son of a gun if it didn't happen for me. I just made it happen. I got canned at that job and tried my hand at Straight Talk Radio. And then I decided, look, man, I had an acting teacher who just passed on, by the way, a guy by the name of Dwayne Hickman. Dwayne was Daryl Hickman's brother, who was both of these guys were child stars and eventually became big actors. But Dwayne used to say, speak your truth, guys. And we'd say, well, what if nobody wants to listen to it? Well, then at least you've spoken your truth. What? That's fantastic. Speak your truth. And that's what I decided to do. And that truth was gonzo, characters, talking to myself, every kind of thing that everybody suspects me of, mental disease, schizophrenia. I've heard it all, It didn't matter to me because I wanted to create really funny theater.
Right.
And I wanted to do it as fast as I could. To do theater, Joe, you have to hire 5 or 6 actors. I got nothing against actors. I just don't have time to hire them or the money So I just decided I'll do it all myself. And when you're in radio, you can do that, and I went with every instinct that I had. You're right. I think the first show I did at KVN, I started the show standing on my head just as a statement for myself. Nothing for the audience, probably didn't even know it, but I did it because I was saying to myself, let's come at this in a completely different way from the way we've done it. I think that's, I don't want to tell anybody how to live, but I think that's pretty good advice for any artist,
It's exactly. I was just gonna say, every artist I like Neil Gaiman, great writer. I've listened to him. Mm-hmm. He said I wrote the Sandman books for myself, and it just so happened a lot of other people liked them. And
that's where it's at, man.
I feel like that's if you approach it that way, because you can't lie to the audience. They're gonna know it when you lie. And I think there's a lot of good life lessons by watching the Hendrie documentary. I mean, and it's true. Just be yourself. Then you're going to put the most passion into your work as well, I think. So,
yeah, when you make yourself laugh, man, that's what I try to do, make myself laugh. If I listen to something I've done and I haven't laughed, then I consider it to be substandard. I want to do it again, So.
Hey, Phil, in a second, we're going to, because we pulled up some clips because, I will tell you this. I've tried in vain to describe your show to people. And after a few minutes, you're like, well, just listen, just go listen. I can't really describe it. So we've got a few clips during this interview I want to play, but I do want to just give you my perspective, how I discovered you. So back in 2002, I didn't, and I'm always way behind on technology. I didn't own a computer then. I just had a radio, whatever. And I'm flipping the dial, and I was actually waiting for Art Bell to come on because, and I think, I don't know, it was 30 minutes early, so I turned it on, and I hear this guy, and I think it was Bobby Dooley, and I'm like, gosh, this lady is irritating, man. What is her problem? And she was upset. It might have been the Elian Gonzalez thing where they want to do the pre-dawn raid on the neighbor's house because they had a blow-up pool in the front or something like that. And within a few minutes, I'm like, okay, this is obviously a gag, but I'll tell you something, Phil. It was 6 months before I realized you did all the voices. I thought you had a bunch of guys and a bunch of actors on the other side of the window, and you are playing off each other, but I had no clue you were. You fooled me.
Well, at least you knew it was comedy. You know,
obviously it was comedy, yeah.
The people that frightened me were the people that say, it took me 6 months to know that it was actually, it was all a joke. Oh, okay. I don't really want to know those people. I'm kidding, of course, but that's pretty funny. A pre-dawn raid for a blow-up pool. That sounds like Bobby.
Oh yeah, because that she considered that child abuse. It was it was basically and we remember that Elian Gonzalez thing, and I thought that was pretty extreme. But hey, Phil, can we play a clip, and we want to get your take on it, Max? 5, 6, and 7. This let me set it up real quick. This is the all-time best, in my opinion, the all-time best caller. Sylvia is in this clip.
Oh, Sylvia.
You were trying to read a Valentine to your wife, and David G. Hall was remodeling the office next door because he is getting Programmer of the Year or something, and it really unfolded in a funny way. So, do you want to listen along, Phil? Check this.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Max. Hit it, man.
Darling, when you and I first met, I remember thinking to myself that we'd have... No, he can't do it. I'm on the air right now. I'm on the air right now. I'm on the air right now. He can't do that. Off, yes. I would like David Hall to call. If David Hall is listening, I would like him to call on our back line, please.
It's starting to unfold from there, so, okay.
I remember the call, yeah, Sylvia. She claimed to have worked for Zsa Zsa Gabor at one time.
Oh, yeah.
Which I believe her,
Yeah.
She was really a sweet lady to me. I'd say, Phil, I worked for Zsa Zsa Gabor. And then David would jump in and shut your mouth, I'm going to send you down, down, down to the ground. She had some wild things that she said. And
we're going to play it for the audience. Hang on real quick, Phil. Okay. Go ahead. Number 6, Max. So let's...
These guys are going to be working till midnight.
Working till midnight?
Yes.
Do you know that Jimmy Newell's in there?
I know Jimmy's there.
Jimmy's wife is in labor.
I don't care if Jimmy's wife is in labor. He's in there working on my office. Now, the longer you talk about it, the less time Jimmy's going to have to be with his wife tonight, if he gets to be with her at all.
His wife went into labor. She's pregnant, and she's going to have a baby. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
So he's working here till midnight. I can't hear anything that I'm doing.
All right, man.
Why are you so...
Okay, so now it's escalating. David G. Hall called and said that Jimmy Newell's his wife's going to labor, and David won't let him go for the delivery or anything. So, all right, last segment. Now we're going to hear from Sylvia, who is easily the best caller of all time. Go ahead, Max.
So that's Sylvia. I can't hear anything because of these guys working.
I know, but he's doing it deliberately. He's a
David,
dog.
David, why don't you tell these guys to knock the work off, okay?
Phil.
That old bag you're talking to ain't worth my time.
All right, So Phil, okay, good. You've got your headphones on now. So
yeah.
The audience heard Sylvia. When I hear Sylvia, I mean, I'm sure she's a lovely woman, but she sounds like some cartoon character yelling out of the window at the Flintstones or something. I mean, was she a real caller? It sound like an actress or something. So.
She was absolutely a real caller. And she was a sweetheart to me because she thought I was a different guy. I was a different guy from David G. Hall. She was obviously elderly, had been in Hollywood and had mentioned that she'd worked for Zsa Zsa Gabor. If she wasn't real, if that was an actress, it was a phenomenal job. It was somebody who obviously, if it was an actress, it was somebody who obviously knew radio very well, who knew how things work. But I think she was absolutely real because it's just, the character was just too perfect,
She was mad. I mean, we could have played the whole thing, but I don't want to eat up the time. But
I think she was a regular. I think she was a listener to the extent that she knew who David Hall was, and she just hated his guts, and she finally wanted to call in and bust on him.
It's funny you say that because I listened to another show, and it might have been the first time she ever called in, and she was kind of civil to David G. Hall. Then she grew to hate the man, and
hate him,
well,
shut up, you sick animal. Yeah.
I wanted to say something because this is so. I'm really interested in how you even do this. when I watch your videos, and folks, go to YouTube and you can watch Phil actually doing his videos, but you make it look really easy, but in my mind I'm like, okay, let's see. You've got 2 to 3 conversations that you're doing. You've got different characters with different inflections. Back in the day when you're doing this on the radio, you've got producers talking in your head. You're watching the clock. You're trying to slowly set up a gag. To me, it seems like you got to focus on about 10 different things, and I don't know how you multitask like that.
Well, I mean, you have to have a storyteller's mentality, I guess. I guess I have that. I know how to unfold a story, because ever since I was a kid, I was always doing voices and telling goofy stories. In terms of the production, in radio, your producer is not really hammering on you like they do in television. So they'll pop in real quick and then they're gone. Watching the clock's not a tough thing. You've got 15 minutes basically for every segment before you stop down for a break. And all you have to do really in that format, I had to tease it out so that it was bringing callers in. It was an outrageous enough thing that organically it would affect callers, and they would want to call. They would demand to call in, and at the same time, make it just kooky enough that it's amusing. David saying, David hammering his office is conceivably something that could happen. And then me getting angry about it or getting upset is also conceivably. You have to do it the right way. You have to do it so that it's almost either it's believable or that you're so pissed off at David because he's such an excuse my French, that you need to call in and confront him, Let me tell you something, Phil. You're doing your show. I got this to do. Let's just, but David, I can't hear anything. I don't care. Who gave you this job? You really play the boss employee thing. These are things that hook people. The boss versus the employee. We all live in that world. The kid who wants to see his wife have a baby. That's real super reach inside and grab you stuff. No one filters that. They just immediately respond to it. That's what you need. You need to have something that people will immediately go, wait a minute, I got to call and talk to that guy because he's a real jackass for saying what he said.
Yeah, very raw. Raw
yeah, it
has
to
be
I have to ask in that vein, Phil, who would you say of your characters has rattled the most sabers over the years?
Bobby Dooley, because she's so real. We all know her. We live next to her. She's she's my mother. She's based on my mother. God rest my mother's soul, Marjorie. But my mother used to talk like that. She's Philip. Are you going to wear those shoes? Are you wearing that shirt? Is that, Yeah, Mom, I am, because I'm getting the Pulitzer Prize for Peace today, Mom. Well, that's fine, but are you going to wear those shoes? So Bobby was that kind of infuriatingly, maddeningly unconscious person that we all know, where we may be related to her. And when she's a neighbor and she's telling you how to live and she's a homeowners association president, Jack, that makes for some great comedy,
Oh yeah.
Especially when her husband is, like her husband is creating topiaries of her breasts.
He's always in the background. It's like that's what cracked me up. I'm like, what is this guy doing? He's always right by her side. He
used to be when Bobby was first introduced. I introduced her at KFI in Los Angeles when we were still local, and I heard this woman on the radio driving into work, and Bobby's first pitch was, well, my husband believes that President Bush, and my husband believes, because I'd heard a lot of women, not a lot, but I've heard some women calling up and saying, well, here's what my husband thinks. And I'm thinking, that's odd. Why don't you tell me what you think? So when she was saying my husband thinks, we had Steve, and another thing that I believe, and my husband also believes. Well, that quickly flipped. I don't know when it did. I don't know why it did, but we decided it would just be funnier for Bobby to express herself and have Steve in the background backing her up.
Right.
However irritating he was. That seemed to work.
I wanted to ask you something because we've got some pretty fun sound clips here I want to get to, but I'm trying to take we've been doing Geek Tank about 10 years. We don't operate at the level of, I would say, stress that you probably did back in the day. I remember specifically, you would listen every show. They're talking about their ratings. We pulled whatever it was. I forget the way they calculate, and then they're ripping on their competitors that weren't getting as good a ratings. And it sounded to me like at any given moment, if you're a host, you're probably thinking, well, if I don't deliver, I'm gone. And is that hard to function in that environment, or is that kind of fuel?
It's the reality. It's the reality.
So
you live
don't even think
there.
about it.
You think about it, but what are you going to do? I went to Mexico. I took my wife to Mexico for, I don't know, we went down there for 10 days, and I knew the book was coming out while we were in Mexico, meaning the book, the ratings for the spring. I don't know when we were down there in 99, so the spring ratings were coming out. And I sweated those ratings every day that we were down there. And we were at a beautiful place, man, and enjoying ourselves. But that whole vacation, I would say, was sort of ruined for me because I knew that I was facing the reality of ratings when I got home. But we still had a good time. I kept it under, but my wife, she knew I was going through it, and it's the reality. When I got home, I got my program director on the phone, and he told me that we did well. And so I'll never forget my wife, Maria at the time, saying, "Thank God," as loud as she could while we were driving home, because it had been a stressor for like 10 days, man.
Right.
So ratings, look, I can go on and on about ratings. Either you get them or you don't. If you don't, it doesn't mean you're not good. It means that at that moment, that zeitgeist, whatever the hell's happening, however they're rating, however the station's promoting you, however the environment is, it just means at that moment you're not getting what that particular algorithm says you should get, and you just keep going. And that's how it works, For me, I was fortunate enough to get enough good ratings where I got hired to good jobs, but yeah, it stinks.
Well, when we interviewed Patrick Reynolds, he made a good point, and it was totally true in my experience. He said sometimes you didn't have the ratings you wanted, but you had great engagement.
Oh yeah.
You don't, like, if I was listening to your show, you don't just stop and go, "Oh, I'll pick it up tomorrow." You have to finish the whole gag. You have to hear it till the end, which says a lot. I mean,
they had me in afternoon drive for a while at KFI, and then they put me quickly back on to nights, because afternoon drive, the numbers did not come in strong for adults. And yet I knew we were doing some of the funniest stuff that had ever been heard. I mean, I had cats that I know. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm such a great hit, but I had TV writers listening to me, man. In this town, on any given day, there's a million cats that are listening to the radio that write for television shows, that write comedy for TV shows. And I had a lot of guys that I knew that would listen because they loved the setup, they loved the jokes, they loved the way. Somebody said to me once that I wrote the equivalent of 3 sitcoms a week while we were doing this show,
You're doing 3 hours a day. I mean, 3 to 4
hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it translate? Yeah.
So it's funny you say that, Phil, because I wasn't necessarily going to bring this up, but now that you said that, I'm a big fan of The Office. I'm sure I don't know if you've watched The Office. When I watch Dwight Schrute, there are elements of Dwight Schrute that are right. They remind me of Jay Sanos, and especially Dwight's. Max, what is his organization that they're
He's the volunteer sheriff's deputy.
Yeah, they're all dressed up in their armbands, and they are right out of Jay Sanos. And
Jay Sanos.
This was before you were doing Jay Sanos years before this gag came along. So
I'm loath to say that anybody has lifted stuff from my show. I don't have any doubt that if you're a writer, you listen to Phil Hendrie and you do comedy, you may find an idea that you like. It doesn't bother me. It's okay. If that happened, if it didn't, that's also okay. I made friends with a lot of these cats are friends of mine now, and good guys. And
oh yeah, that's a flattery.
So
if they copy you.
It is, and they write a lot of fun. Me, I don't watch a lot of comedy, not because I don't like comedy, not because I don't love comedians, but I don't want as Vin Scully once said about his sportscasting, I don't want my point of view polluted. I don't want to be unconsciously influenced, but I still have a lot of comics and a lot of shows that I like to pop in and watch.
Max, did you have something you wanted to ask him? Oh, okay. Hey, Phil, we're going to play a clip. Max, can you hit clip number 10? In this clip, this is Ted Bell, and his idea was that because he's ultra rich, and this was 2002, so we had all the heightened security at the airports, and Ted Bell felt that if you could just show that you have a bank account showing more than $100,000 and you drive a certain kind of car, you don't have to wait in line or get wanded or any of that stuff. And the caller was reacting to that. But there's a point about this little clip that I want to bring up. But go ahead, Max. So let's play this.
Jerry,
You're the only one that sounds like a redneck on
Jerry,
this show.
look, it's fun for you folk to go see flying machines at the airport, You'll stand in line for a long time. I got to get going. I'm Ted Bell. Now, I've got a membership.
Do you get psychiatric help? Because you really need it.
Why do I need psychiatric help?
You really need it. So listening to you,
Oh, so you want to?
You really need psychiatric help.
You want to stand there?
You should take some of your money from your restaurants that your employees slave away for, and go get psychiatric help. That's really what you need to do.
Okay, so here it was. So Ted Bell was basically going at it with this caller, and he, in his opinion, he sounded a little bit like a hillbilly or something. He said, "Look, man, you may enjoy going to the airport and watching the flying machines and the whole, it's a thrill for you. I'm a businessman. I go to whatever." So, and the thing is, the caller didn't. He stepped right over your punchline. And then you, as Phil, said, hold on a second. What do you mean flying machine? You basically salvaged the punchline. And I've noticed that's a device that you use quite a bit, because it is frustrating when you say something and maybe it gets stepped on or maybe it gets lost. You basically get to resurrect it with your technique.
And I played a character on the show. The character that I played was a very moderating, a very patient, and very open-minded, and mostly on the side of the audience. So the way you did that is he said something insulting. It wasn't so much that to the audience's mind, I'm insulted on behalf of the audience. In my mind, I've got to get that punchline out there. Yeah, because it's very funny. Who wants to lose that? But I am saying to Ted, how dare you say these terrible things, like, the guy wanting a flying machine or whatever. The audience will go, yeah, Phil's on my side. And so, especially when they called and they argued, I would be on the audience's side, and it would be Ted against the world in that situation,
It's funny, Phil. It's like you're looking at my cheat sheet here, because I have a note here, and it says, when I listen, I feel like you're an advocate for the audience. And what I mean by that is, it's not just that. It's like we've all heard shows where maybe it's just not working, man. And the host almost seems oblivious to it. Like sometimes you'll be talking in your show, the show these days where you've got the panel, and you'll start making a point, and all of a sudden General Shaw interrupts you and is like, "Okay, Phil, what are you making a speech here? Just you're burning daylight. Let's get to it." And so on some level, you feel like you got to move the show along, and you're advocating for the audience. So,
and I'm also very self-conscious about, as you might guess, about just Phil sitting there talking. I've always been really self-conscious about that. I've never thought that I alone was very interesting. I had to do a character voice. I got to do something. I got to explode a bomb someplace to make it interesting. So that's me telling myself, just you talking ain't interesting. Get some characters involved. I don't know if it's some kind of a mental illness I have, but that's how I feel.
I don't know, man. It seems to work for you. Go ahead, Max.
It almost makes me think of how when Johnny Carson, like some of his best stuff is when he would have to try to salvage something that fell flat, and that's when everything went at best, when you kind of embrace the mistakes.
Yeah, well, Johnny Carson made art out of bombing a joke. It was the most beautiful. It was
funnier.
Oh my God, it was so funny. Yeah, to watch him just. So anyway, right. Let's you loved it when he stiffed a joke, and stiffing a joke can be funny too, because you're mocking the whole concept of humor. Like, what is this supposed to be funny, or is it real? I mean, why are we even laughing at this?
To me, it's like, Johnny Carson had a similar thing. Like, I would say resurrecting the punchline or something. That there's an art to that, because I've been to a couple of stand-up clubs where they really just bombed it, and there is nothing more uncomfortable than. And one guy, he was on stage and he's like, "Man, I still got another 10 minutes to go," and you could tell he was he wanted to just run, and that's bad.
I know, man. It sucks. I've been there. Yeah, stand-up is anybody that does stand-up has my infinite respect. It's the toughest thing in the world to do. I think it may be the toughest art form that there is. The people that do it well are brilliant. There's a timing. You have to get the punchline out. This is sort of a 3 beats and then joke, 3 beats and joke. You got to make sure the audience is laughing all the time. I tried it myself, and I can't do it. I'm too undisciplined. I like to do a lot of improv humor, but stand-up stuff, yeah.
Oh, I thought you did I thought you did. What is that you do when you do your appearances and stuff?
We don't yet know. No, I'm kidding. What it is I do. Here's an example of what I did. I did this at UCB, and I want to do more of this. UCB is Upright Citizens Brigade. It's an improv theater here in Los Angeles, of which I'm sure they have many around the country. But I had a character by the name of, I have a character by the name of Chris Norton, who is an adult filmmaker. And I just go out and tell the story. Hi, I'm Chris Norton, and I'm raising money for a new movie I'm making called Daffy. But anyway, this dude's just goes where it wants to go, and he can't control it, and that's why they call it Daffy. It goes to chicks that he doesn't like, and so eventually the dies and becomes ghost. Well, I did this. I told this story at UCB, and I got nothing but laughs. So I figured that's a way of standing up and making an audience enjoy you. If you're not doing jokes, you just have to do one long, extended, bizarre story.
I feel like yeah. I feel
Steve
like
Ozell the other day on the show the other day, we had Steve Ozell saying, I have ED, I have erectile dysfunction, and my wife takes me to Paris, and there's the Eiffel Tower. I mean, what's she trying to say to me? You know,
he's Steve Ozell might be my favorite of your characters. So, but I wanted to ask you. So back in the 80s, I don't know, I went and saw Rush in concert. You know, the band Rush. And Geddy Lee, for those of you who don't know, Rush, it's 3 guys, and it sounds like there's like 10 guys in the band. They're really good. But basically, Geddy Lee was standing, he plays the bass, and he sings, and he's standing in front of the keyboard, and he's working foot pedals. And at any given song, he's doing all this, he switches instantly from the bass to the keyboards and all. And I don't know how you multitask on that level. And when I watch your show now, the Netcast, you do everything. You're doing the sound clips. And you remind me a little bit of Geddy Lee in this situation. So is it a lot of multitasking or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's if you got into radio at the real, nuts and bolts level like I did, which is I went in as a disc jockey at a small market station, Winter Park, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando, and you had to produce your own commercials. And you had to do a serious amount of production. And so you're in the production studio and you're learning this. Well, if you have the instincts that I have, you like that. I liked being in that room. I liked creating stuff. I would go in at 4 o'clock. I'd have a date. And these tells you how young I was at the time. You'd go out with a girl till 4, drop her off at 3 a.m. and immediately go to the station because you had an air shift coming up at 6. And I'd sit in the production room screwing around, making goofy tapes. So production, as we call it in radio, where you're sitting there and you're cutting tape and was an instinct for me. And I liked it. I liked doing it. And I liked creating things. And I relied on it too much as a disc jockey. I did too many pre-recorded things. I don't like to do too much that's pre-recorded. I don't mind having sound effects and that kind of thing. But pre-recorded comedy leaves no room for improvisation. It doesn't leave any room for changing it at the last minute if you want to. It's just a stayed bit. So I never thought it was as funny doing it that way, but I love having the production elements. I love producing on the run, and that means knowing where your cart machine is, knowing where your reel is, where's the microphone, where's the EQ, and why do you know all of this? Because you want to create this world. So in my mind, I'm not thinking, I got all this stuff I got to remember. In my mind, I'm thinking, let's make this world come to life.
These are tools at your disposal. So
right.
That's a mindset though that I think speaks to why you've been successful. Because some people will be overwhelmed with I don't know, taking risks.
I think it's true of any profession. I think anybody that loves what they do for a living, if they take a good long hard look at what they're doing, they're probably doing the same kind of improvisational moves during their day.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if you're an executive,
Yep.
Make a phone call. I got to do this. I got to make this. I got to do this. I got to talk to him. I got to talk to this. This is all stuff that gets woven through a day that successful people make happen.
Max, you had something? Max wants to ask you something.
I kind of have to, with regards to like instinct and everything and nurturing instinct, at what point in your career did you, in order to create the believability of multiple people in the room, even though it was just you, did you realize that you had to like adjust your position in accordance to like where the microphone was? Like you might be in the bottom left corner when you're speaking as Bud, towards the back if you're Galen Shaw.
Oh yeah.
You mean where my throat is or where I am in terms of the microphone? I mean, yeah, you automatically realize that changing ambience can change even the sound of a character. You might even be able to do a new character, Ambient change where the character is away from the mic or up on top of the mic lends itself to a lot of things. Mostly humor, if you have a character saying, and I'll tell you one thing, Phil, what do you want to tell me? Forget it. And as he's fading away from the microphone and saying, forget it, there's a certain humor to that. But I just discovered that the way I discovered anything. Oh, this works, that doesn't. this sucks. I got to make it sound better. How do I make it sound better? Maybe if I move the, oh, look, now that sounds good. This sounds to, nobody goes, hi, how are you? I'm fine. People generally say, hi, I'm fine. But let me just, they interrupt each other, and the breaths are taken in different places. And the goal for me was always to make it sound as real as possible, because that's what makes it funny, And so anything that added to the reality of the bit, anything that added to, the reality of some clown saying the ridiculous stuff that he's saying, you find it and you use it. And the ambient change that you're talking about is one of those things,
Yeah, because when you're watching videos, folks, on YouTube of Phil doing the show, you're moving constantly. It actually is kind of tiring doing your show. But at first you're like, well, what's his problem? Is he just hyperactive? And then you realize, no, okay, if the general lifts his chin up, he sounds like he's over in this one corner. It feels like the room is full, like you said. And that's a very subtle understanding of microphones.
If I do the general, I'm on the microphone like right here, and I'll go, you know something, Phil? I automatically move away from the mic. Why? Because the general is not me. He may be using the mic differently. He's in a different part of the room. So I just automatically, and I'll look at the VU to see how the levels are. And if he sounds too faint, I'll kind of goose the level a little bit. But a character has certain physical mannerisms that you can't divorce, even if it's just audio.
Right.
I mean, I've done bits on the air. Somebody said to me, Phil, do you realize that you were kneeling? Oh, yeah, you're right. I had to kneel because she was praying, this character, Margaret. So I got down and I was kneeling as she was talking, Do you do that because you want to be some groovy-ass method actor? No, the instinct is to kneel because that's what the character's doing.
It's just like with Ted Bell. You're always smiling when you do Ted Bell.
You're always smiling with Ted. Even though he could be in pain, he could be like, you know what, Phil, if I got to sit for much longer with this interview, I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
But he's one of those guys that always smiles. And I met a guy like that in Vegas. I mean, Ted and Dean Wheeler were inspired by a guy I met in Vegas. I came out of a hotel in Vegas, and this guy's smiling like this. Hi, good. How you doing? Terrible. Dropped 10,000 last night. Just like that. I was like,
Where's the masks? Go ahead,
he was
Matt.
on his way out of town, yeah.
What'd you say, Max?
What I was going to say was that actually kind of like I'm a little bit of a philosophy nerd, but it kind of makes me think a little bit of there's this philosopher I enjoy by the name of Kierkegaard, and he would almost write his works as if he were because he writes under different pseudonyms, and so the way he would write as if he were this particular person, his particular philosophical work, and so it kind of makes me think of what you were just saying about how I'm going to do this because this is what Margaret would have done.
I like that. Kierkegaard was in character when he was writing his various works.
Exactly.
Oh, that's heavy. I didn't know that. I thought Kierkegaard was a brand of coffee table. But no, I knew who it was. But my hat's off to you, brother, for reading philosophy.
Oh yeah, Max is deep.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil, there's something else. The one thing that's inescapable when you listen to your old shows, and like I said, folks, if you get the backstage pass, I mean, your show changes texture every 4 or 5 years. So it's always pretty fresh. But one thing, you would have the callers on the line with you, and it's people just talking on top of each other. And that's one of the most... Whenever during the news stations, the news talk shows of the day, that's all they did. They didn't discuss anything. They just basically argued, and it was so obnoxious to listen to. Were you trolling that kind of idea, or is this just something to make it funnier?
Well, it's just simply taking the reality. As I said to you, there's nothing better than satirizing reality. Taking the reality of what a talk show sounds like and just turning it on its head a little bit. So. I started doing the show the way I did because I was on a talk station, so that seemed to be the thing to do, to make it sound like a talk show. I'm not a big fan of talk radio, so it wasn't hard to mock the various aspects of it. Trolling, I think, might be a word a little heavy. I was just simply taking what they gave me, and as we do, as all satire is just simply taking the raw material and extending it in a certain direction so that its absurdity becomes obvious to everybody. So there's guys arguing the phone. And, well, naturally, I'm going to do that. I'll have my characters argue. And there's guys I got a character named Pete Bone, who I don't use a lot.
You used him the other day. Yeah.
He's based on the character. He's based on a talk show host I listened to as a kid in the 60s and 70s who were pissed off. And let me tell you something else. Remember those guys who are just like all really pissed?
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to lay it on the line right now. And they ain't laying anything on the line, man. They're just trying to pull audience and keep the sponsors happy. So,
right.
I'm not a fan of talk radio, and we can see what's happened to it, and you can make your own judgment. But satirizing it seemed to be the thing to do. And so if you call satire trolling, I suppose, but it was just a commentary more than anything else on what I was hearing,
Well, it sure adds to the texture of the show, and it actually made it sound more like a talk show.
Right.
But it really illustrated just how irritating that type of discussion is. I personally, every time it happens, it grates on you. But I thought you did it in a funny way too, though. So, but hey, Phil, do you ever hear these voices in your head when you? Okay, here's what I'm picturing. Okay, it's one thing to be at a radio station and you got the call screener on the other line and you're on. Everybody knows this is your show. What's it like when you're working at home by yourself in a room and you're doing all that? Does it ever make you, I don't know, self-conscious and then and you're laughing and then I don't know? Do you hear these?
No, I'm working. I'm creating. It's like throwing paint on a canvas, I guess. It's like doing anything unusual, and I'm working and I'm creating something. So, and I will laugh at some of the stuff that I do, and I'll keep the laughs in sometimes. Recently, I've decided that when I start to break myself up, I'm going to leave that into the show, just leave a few of them in the show just to show that there's a creative process going on. But I don't get self-conscious about anything that I do. Other than the fact that, I don't know, man. I feel more sorry for people that don't understand what it is I'm doing, I guess. The people I feel sorry for are people in our business, other entertainers or other performers that think that I'm doing is too extreme. They think, I wouldn't do that.
Really?
Man, I would never judge anybody that way. I could say whether they're funny or not, or whether they're moving me in a certain direction or not, but the method of the performance is up to the person doing it, and there's only either you're making people laugh or you're not,
I don't know how many mediocre people ever make history, though, so why would you want to be, why wouldn't you want to be kind of as far out there as you could? So I do want to, maybe at the end of this we'll play Art Bell, because you do a spot on Art Bell, and he was actually... He was a fan of yours, right? I mean, there was nothing, and what a legend. Art Bell is just
my God,
awesome. But
an original, man, an original,
one of a kind. Yeah,
I admire guys that are original, and he was definitely that.
Hey, could you do us a favor though? Because I had a Herb Sewell clip pulled up, and that's Max's favorite character. You sicko. That's his favorite. Can you do the laugh? Because to me, what makes Herb Sewell was the,
Well, you Joe, you say that the laugh comes from deep inside. Because I can tell you. The one person that when I think about her, I want to kill her is Mother. No, I don't want to really kill Mother, but in many ways I fantasize about it. That's Herb.
Where did that laugh come from? Because is Herb Sewell based on Orson Welles?
No, he's based on originally the voice. The voice was originally the voice of a guy named Neil Myers, who worked overnights on Mutual Radio, and then I threw in William F. Buckley. And William F. Buckley sort of spoke this way. And so we had her sort of talking like this. And although now that you mention it, there is kind of an Orson Welles thing there.
That's what I thought of.
Yeah. And I immediately made him a psycho and a weird, sick dude. And we took it as far as we could in that direction. So I, don't use him as much anymore based upon the character's origins.
It's kind of hard to joke about stuff like that.
Nowadays, without people misinterpreting. There was a time, I suppose, and I'm not one of these guys that says, "What are you, woke?" I'm woke. I don't mind telling people that. I don't use the K word when I'm talking about Jews. I don't use the N word when I'm talking about black people. A lot of these cats that say they're anti-woke, when they start using the N word on stage, I'll believe them.
Yeah.
Until then, they're just as woke as me, bro.
Yeah.
So, I understand how people feel. And look, I'm in business to make money and to make a living. I am not here to piss off my audience and have them turn around and go someplace else. So Herb Sewell served a purpose up to a point, and then Phil Hendrie just took me and threw me in the garbage can, which is what people have done. But they'll see. They'll know. I'll get my revenge someday.
Hey, have you ever been told that you when I listen to the show, Phil, I hear influences of Jackie Gleason. Am I wrong?
I love Jackie Gleason. Yeah.
I feel like the way you punctuate certain gags, especially back in the day when at the end you would say, like, some comment that Steve Bozell made, and then right before you're going to break, it sounded exactly like the Honeymooners or something.
Gleason, yeah. What are you talking about? Yeah, I love that show. I don't know what it is about. I thought Gleason's character was hysterical. And that was a character that wasn't based really on punchlines. That character was based on attitude. Mm-hmm. And he was based on, his reactions and again, he would threaten to punch Alice, but never really did. And he would, I loved him for that. I loved the characterization, and I love Jackie Gleason for something that he should really be admired for. He was a big fat man, not afraid to move his body around a stage. And that's,
oh yeah.
People that are heavy are self-conscious. I don't blame them. Gleason, he didn't let that stop him, and it's like Lucille Ball. She was a beautiful woman, man, who did not mind blackening her teeth and looking like a hag or looking like a witch or looking like some bag lady. In other words, whatever they were, they didn't mind changing it and transferring it into something new and different. That to me takes a lot of guts, and that I admire that, and that's what I try to pattern my own stuff after,
Yeah, they're. I guess the word is fearless. I've heard that said about like John Belushi and people like that. They immerse themselves and they don't hold back anything.
Yeah, fearless is a great, especially Belushi. Some of the stuff he did on stage, the physical. I'm not talking necessarily about him doing the tumbling and stuff, but he would break character sometimes. Not break character, but break attitude sometimes, and really get into. So you're a big rock star, huh? Big rock star. You remember when he would do that whole baiting of I just loved him for that,
Yeah.
No, we'd like to do that, Mr. McCartney, but we don't have your money, do we? No, we don't.
Oh yeah. Hey,
love him.
Phil, how do you breathe? You're doing all of these voices. I've listened to some where it could be 5 minutes straight of characters talking up on top of each other. Does that require like breathing techniques or something?
No, it doesn't. I suppose it's a technique, but what you're going for is the reality of the conversation. So I want a real conversation, not a real conversation. I want a conversation that sounds like it's real. It's two crazy people talking, but it sounds like they're talking. And to make that happen, you have to do certain things. I don't plan it out. I instinctively do it. So if I'm saying, well, I'm Bobby Dooley. And what did you say, Phil? Well, I was just, so when people talk, they don't stop and wait for the person to end the word. They jump right in. So, Phil, you were saying something. Well, what I was saying, because I was eager to talk about what I wanted to say, so you jump in. If I wasn't thinking about it, what did you want to say, Phil? Well, I mean, what I wanted to say was you'll pause. So can you hear that? There's a guy who's actually sawing a house in half next door. I don't know
awesome.
If you hear that.
I don't hear it, but that's ambiance. There you go. Yeah.
But so what do we sound like when we are in a certain attitude or when we're discussing a certain thing? Then that's what you go for. If I said today I was on the air with Joe, what did you guys talk about? Well, thanks for asking, because we talked about a lot of stuff with the career. Did you get into the thing? Yeah, we did. As a matter of fact, you see how I'm kind of approximating what a real give and take exchange would sound like, and that's coming from memory. It's coming from performance instinct, and the need for it to ultimately, in my case, to be amusing. So.
And it would never sound like that if it was scripted, because people would read to the end. It's like, and you would complete your sentences, and the way you interrupt the sentences are I think, what gives it authenticity. So, hey, Phil, I don't want to keep you all day, but look, I'm a target audience of your. I mean, I'm a Backstage Pass member. I literally listen every day. And I just wanted to give you a couple of things that I think these are some, I would almost just call them elements of your show that I hope I hope you don't get rid of them. They're like some of the things I love the best. I love callers being hung up on in mid sentence. Steve Bozel's like, now Phil, and then you just hang. Where did that come from?
I'm glad
that is
you like
one of my favorite things. So.
It just all of a sudden one day the instinct was for me to, okay, I'm all done with them, and you hang up. You know, you say, well, thanks very much. Yeah, one more thing. You know, it's just hysterical. I think people want to keep talking sometimes. We all want to. We got one more thing we want to say. And it's also it's not funny. If I'm doing the phone call, Steve, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Hendrie. It's been great on. Okay, great. Okay, well, that's the way it usually ends, but that's not particularly funny or particularly, I don't know. Maybe there's a different way I could do it, but I just decided, thanks, Steve, so much. Thank you, Mr. Hendrie. And okay, that was Steve Bozel. It works. Until it doesn't work, I guess we'll just keep on doing it, you know.
Another thing I love is like, I love how you know, it might be something, Steve Bozel, he's on there, I don't know, He's crying. He's upset about something. He's like, and Mr. Hendrie, I'd like to see how you like walking around in a diaper. Well, we're here today with Steve Bozel. Immediately, like, you reset the table. Like, okay, after they say the most embarrassing thing possible, you make sure the audience knows who you're talking to.
Is that like coming out of a break, you mean? Or,
no, man. It'll be like he's going on a big riff. And it's like, you know how if you're on the show, you might, I don't know, every 4 or 5 minutes, you're like, we're talking today with whoever. Oh, yeah. And you always pick the most inopportune moments to mention who you're talking to.
Yeah, I think that's timing. I think all of that it's all part of the same drive, which is to make it interesting, make it funny. You're always looking for places where you can make it funny. Always looking for places where you keep it interesting, and the whole package should come together as, oh, gee, that was a really funny 3 minute or whatever you did, Phil, like 20 minutes. So it just is instinctive to say, yeah, and then the man stands there and tells me that I look like a fool, all because I was wearing a diaper, and I have to wear the diaper. The diaper is everything to me. Okay, hold on. We're talking to Steve Bozel. So right there, right there, it just is a perfect thing, what are you going to say to that? The diaper is everything to me. I could say, the diaper is everything to you. Hey, well, you can laugh if you want, Mr. All right, well, hold on. There's a lot of things you can go there with, but yeah, it all works. Serves the same purpose. It's almost like when you're doing your show, Joe, you're thinking, how can I keep this moving along? Right. We have audio, we have this. Here's a question. It's the same mechanics, I think, involved. It's just what is the tenor of what you do? What's the tenor of what I do? And how do we make those things keep going to the very end and keep the audience with us?
Well, I'll tell you this, Phil, and for one thing, I've stolen a lot of ideas from you, or more or less just I've tried to, follow your best practices. And one thing that I determined for myself, because we do we do Geek Tank Radio, then we do a show on Saturdays called Tool Talk Radio. It's a kind of a funny home improvement show. And if anything ever occurred to me, and instead of saying, I'm not going to say that, I always say it, and I'm almost always glad I did. I feel like in that moment, it's better to take action, I think. And
sure, yeah.
And pull the trigger.
As long as it's not obscene or something that's going to get your station fined. But yeah. Oh, I can't say that. Why not say it?
Right.
Why not say it? Challenge the audience. Right. And they'll challenge you back, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And they may even say, how could you say something like that? Well, you have your reasons, and they're good reasons. If you know what the point is of what you're saying, you can always defend yourself. And I love Don Imus. I think he's one of the great radio talents of all time. But and I know that Don Imus was bounced off the air a number of years ago when he used that nappy-headed blank. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. He did not know why he said that. Now, maybe Don Imus could sit here right now and say, Phil, you're full of crap. Yes, I do. No, I'm telling you right now, as a professional, he was repeating what somebody else on the panel had said.
Right.
But he had no reason why to say why. And when you have and he couldn't defend himself then. They could say, well, why did you say that? But if they ask Joe or they ask Phil, why did you say that? We know. Well, I'll tell you why. You may not like the reason.
Right.
You may not disagree. You may disagree with me. But I'll tell you why I said it. It's to serve this purpose. It was to go here. It was to go there. It was to make this point. You can never go wrong if you know why you said what you said.
Right.
And they may hate your guts for it, but.
Well, Phil, in fairness, we're not really that controversial on Tool Talk. We don't really offend any, but I will say, you don't always have to joke about a table saw or something. But if I can find a way to make it funny, I will. So I mean,
go for it.
And I more or less modeled myself after your approach. But Max, you had something he wants to.
I was going to say another thing that I also appreciate, or as a student of the show and like a frequent listener, that I also appreciate is the sort of element of nostalgia when you see or hear a character that you haven't heard in a while, or not only that, but like when certain sound bites are recurring. Like for example, that drive-through teenage kid who just keeps saying, "Hi, how you doing? Have your order whenever you're ready." It's like, what is this?
Can you play that, Max? We have Phil. I know you can't hear this, but the audience has to hear this. Because I want to ask you about that. So can you hang tight for a second? Go ahead, Max.
No problem.
Let it roll.
Hold on for a minute. I got to talk to this idiot. Not an idiot. I mean, he's a fine young man. I want to get the.
How you doing?
I'm great.
Go ahead, I'll be ready.
Yeah, I want to get give me a napkin and a. Well, I want more than a napkin, but I can't.
All right.
Yeah. And then give me a. Yeah, and I'll take what do you got? A sandwich or something? Let me see.
How you doing?
I'm fine. You already
I'll be ready.
Frank, we're talking to you.
Okay, so this went on and on. Well, this is the gag where Frank Gray is at the drive-through and the guy's, "Hi, how you doing?" And he couldn't get the order straight. Give me a napkin. And Frank's a little out there anyway, but where is this "Hi, how you doing" guy? Because every time you bring that on, I crack up, man.
That's just a drop that we found. It's a sound effect that we found. There were 4 of them. I don't know if I found them. I think maybe my engineer at the time, Fred, did. We used to have carts, then we had wave cart. Now we have everything's digital, and I use a digital file. I think it's called Eclipse. But in that file are 4 distinct drops, and there's also one long, what we call the drive-through sound of it. It's the sound of a car idling through a drive-through, or it's the sound of a car driving slowly. But the 4 are, "Hey, how you doing? What can I get your order?" "All right." The second one is, "All right. Is that want anything else?" And then the third one is, "All right, be 3:45 at the window, okay?"
Yeah.
And then the fourth and final one is the guy going, "Okay, there you go. Have a nice day." Those 4 we use all the time, and Frank's like, "Yeah, I need a butter. Hi, how you doing? Great. Could I get the buttered bun, please? All right, what's your order?" I just told you. It's So you could do anything you want with those, right? So you have those 4, and you can have somebody completely flustered, and or you can have a person actually getting an order. But those are actual pre-recorded someplace sound effects that we found of a guy in a drive-through.
There's things that are always going to be funny to me. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit, like if I'm listening to a show and they, if I had my way, we'd have Max. He'd have all these hotkeys of like toilets flushing and people throwing up and the whole. I just think that stuff's funny. I don't know. I mean, I know they overdid it probably back in the '90s with the morning guys, but it's just funny, man, when you drop in a side sound effect like that.
Speaking of the morning guys and the irreverence, I have to ask, where did Skippy and Frank come from?
They were a satire of Mark and Brian. I know Mark and Brian from LA. They're great guys, very, very talented guys. But there was a period there in morning radio where they had the morning show, the Goofy Morning Show team. Every city had them. It was generally 2 guys. It was Don and Mike. Here in LA, we had Mark and Brian, and in Memphis, there's probably some 2 men. And so this was just us satirizing that, Skippy, and I'm Frank. "Hey, let me tell you something. Come on out there this weekend. We're going to be showing. If you show us your butt, girls, okay? Well, I mean, no, let's see your butt. They're always asking about breasts. Let's see the butt. Okay, show us your butt, hang it out a window, and we'll give you." And then they get in trouble with the fathers of these women, and one of them gets shot. So, we just take it to the absurd extreme.
Yeah, but he was doing like life-threatening stunts. Okay, we're gonna, we have to watch what we say. But we're gonna stick an M80 up and light it, and it's just obnoxious. But it reminds me because I grew up in Chicago listening to like Steve Dahl and I remember that Disco Demolition event very well, and just idiots on the show. But I'm sorry, it's funny. I mean,
well, you grew up listening to one of the pioneers, in my opinion, of great gonzo radio, Steve Dahl, Howard Stern. There's not a lot of them.
Jonathan Brandmeier was great.
Johnny B was great. But Steve Dahl, I think, predated all of them, man. Dahl was off the freaking charts before any of those other cats, and blowing up the disco records. Talk about zeitgeist. Talk about right on, man. Talk about capturing the moment that was necessary. Disco had reached its peak of horrificness, and they just needed to blow those records up, man. But the whole thing devolved into such chaos. There was it Comiskey Park where you did that?
Now the thing is, I'm a diehard Cubs fan, so and of course I was too young for that. I would have only been 13, but I watched it. You know, I listened to the Loop every morning. That was the station, and but. Yeah, like 75,000 people showed up, and they were climbing the walls, and they lit the outfield on fire, and it was a train wreck, and it was one of the most infamous moments in sports. Really, it was terrible, but it was funny. But you know,
Dahl mentioned later that because Dahl's influence was so widespread in those days, being anti-disco, there were some disco stations that had advertisements on the sides of, I think, trams that were out at the lake. And so little old ladies and people would ride in these trams, but there were these big disco signs. So Steve Dahl fans would be jumping on these trams and going, disco sucks, and then jumping off. And Dahl said, I'm aware that these things are going on, but I'm only one man. What can one man do?
Oh, yeah. He had an army of guys behind him. I grew up in it, Phil. I'm telling you, man, those bumper stickers were everywhere. And you were just waiting. And, you know, I got nothing against people that like disco or something. I mean, I even like a few Bee Gees songs, but he hated it. I thought he had a grudge because he got fired by a disco station.
Actually,
or something.
It really was capturing the feeling of the moment. I hate to say this, but rock and roll people were just full of hate for disco. I hated disco. I hated and I loved the Bee Gees. I remember the Bee Gees when they were like a really cool kind of folk rock band. And I even got yelled at by one of the Bee Gees when I was in London years later. And we were interviewing a bunch of guys there at Albert Hall. The Bee Gees came in. And I made the mistake of bringing up Xanadu and some of their disco. And I think Robin looked at me and said, we don't do that anymore. Why do you keep bringing that stuff up, okay? We're not that bad, you know. All right, I'm sorry. Disco was hated by rock people. And so Steve Dahl wasn't just doing something to be mean. He was doing something he knew the audience was like totally down for, you know?
Right.
Now, I don't agree that, people got hurt. If things went haywire, that's wrong, man. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know that.
No, nobody got hurt, but I do understand that there were a lot of people that took it the wrong way. They thought that, hey, man, I'm just trying to make a living here. I'm a musician and all that type of thing.
I hear you.
So, yeah.
I hear you. Yeah. Steve he was doing what every great radio personality in those days, and probably even if the radio existed the way it did, he was doing what every great radio personality should do. He was grabbing the moment for his radio station. He was creating an event. He made the Loop probably a lot of money. A lot of advertising dollars doing what he did. So
I'm sure he did. Yeah. Hey, Phil, I mean, I know you probably got to get prepped for your show. I am curious. I'm really curious about this. I've listened to you do this 100 times. Whenever somebody makes a very, special pronouncement or something and Bud approves, he claps. But I don't know how you do that, because sometimes I've heard the clap, like going, yeah, and he claps, but it sounds like you're holding the phone. And how does that work? Like, can you demonstrate that clap?
And then I'm Phil Hendrie, and I was born with only one leg. Yeah, right. Yeah. I like that, Mr. Henry.
Okay, but how do you clap when you're holding a phone? Because I've heard you do that when you got a caller on the line sometimes.
When I'm holding the phone, I pound my hand on the desk.
Okay, well, that's simple enough, but I was just curious.
Yeah, right, yeah. And it's about all you can do, because you're not going to lay the phone down. You'll hear that, and I've also recently had a problem with echo, and I figured it out.
Yeah.
I use two limiters. I use a limiter on my mic, a limiter on the phone, and I backed the limiter off of the mic, and suddenly the echo disappeared. I had no idea where that was coming from, and it was driving me nuts. But yeah, he'll just hold the phone, or I'll hold the phone and bang my hand on the desk.
Last question. What's the deal with so many guests calling you from their bathtubs?
It just turned out to be really funny. Yeah, I had this bathtub sound effect. I thought, well, how about a guy calling in from the bathtub? I don't know who the first one was, but I've had a very tough day. I hope you don't mind, Phil. No, not at all. It sounds.
And they're I mean, okay, who thinks of that? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, well, you know, we and it's always resetting the table. Okay, we're here with Dr. Jim Sadler. He is in the bathtub, and it's just, I mean,
and thank you, Phil, for indulging me. But I had this tough day. Excuse me for a minute. Could you give me the soap and give me just a little bit of tangerine juice? So anyway, Phil, and I thought, and that the audience reaction to it was so great that we've actually got a best of bathtub thing that we play occasionally. These are all the characters in a bathtub. Yeah, I don't know. It's something about it's really funny. You know, I think I've actually talked to people where they've been sitting in a bathtub on the phone occasionally.
You can tell. Well, you definitely talk to people when they're in the bathroom. I mean, we all know that. So you're just taking it to the next level. Hey, I'm curious though. Last thing, I told you Steve Bozell, I think, is my favorite character of yours. Although they're all, I mean, it's hard to pick just one, but for my money, he cracks me up. Was he? Two questions. Was he based on Dick Vermeil, the Philadelphia coach? I never knew he was such a crybaby. Is that
well? And I don't mean to be. Dick Vermeil was a great coach. He coached here at UCLA. Then he went on to coach for the Eagles. I think he coached the Chiefs. But Dick Vermeil, bless his heart, when he was emotional after a game, he would just say, "My players know where I'm coming from." You could hear his voice crack. And as Steve started to kind of do the same thing, you know, Steve Bozell started as Warnell. And he talked like this: "I'm a Dallas businessman, and I've gone to the Daytona 500, the greatest spectacle in racing. And now gradually I changed him when I got to LA, I think, or maybe Miami. He went down to this kind of thing." And as soon as I went into that voice, Vermeil came to mind. And when Vermeil came to mind, I realized that what Steve really was a successful man, he was in the construction contractor. I based him on guys that I used to work for, but he kind of sensitive, you know, and I worked very hard. My wife comes out and my wife came out and she had these, shaped popsicles for her bachelorette party. And I was out there sucking one. And next thing you know, they're looking at me like I'm kind of weird. And I don't understand that. So, woo, you know.
Woo. He always does that. Like he's right on the verge of tears. And he always wants to sue everybody too.
Yeah. And right now my daughter has a beautiful little puppy, but the puppy, to my mind, looked like the puppy aimed it at me. Aimed what? The puppy, it urinated on me. And you think the puppy did it on purpose? I don't know, but right now I'm bringing a legal action. Now, you're suing your own daughter. No, hold on, Mr. Hendrie, because that sounds absurd. So you got to kind of stop. I'm bringing a legal action against my daughter and the dog as a legal entity. To what end? That I'll sue them and they lose. So what do they get? You know, what do you get from them?
Oh,
I mean, I'll feel good that I won this. Who knows, you know? But he's such a baby. Yeah, he sues his daughter. He sued his next door neighbor for growing a zucchini that looked similar to John Holmes. I mean, the whole thing just is kind of goofy.
Well, Phil, man, thanks. I just looked at the clock. Boy, did we keep you a long time. I know you got to get ready for your show, but hey, so you're nominated to the Hall of Fame, which to me sounds like about 20 years overdue, but I guess that's a cool honor, right? I mean, the Radio Hall of Fame.
To be nominated. I was completely taken by surprise. I mean, it didn't even seem real because my good friend Craig Kitchen told me, Craig used to be my boss at Premiere. And I said, I think that I wasn't expecting that one, man. So I'm very, very appreciative and honored. And, maybe what we did on the radio what we did on the radio is of some value, in terms of the radio establishment. We'll see,
Absolutely. Well, Phil, man, this has been a real treat talking to you. And like I said, I'll be listening to you tomorrow morning. I mean, it's awesome, how I start my day out.
Thank you so much for that, brother. I appreciate that very much.
And like I said, folks, if you want to listen, if you want to get the backstage pass, I got, Phil, can you go ahead and pitch the backstage pass? Because it is a great value.
You can get it at philhendrieshow.com. It's less than $10 for a month. It's less than $7 a month over the course of a 1-year subscription. And we've got 60,000 hours of material. We got a huge media archive, man. I don't know anybody that's got one bigger. Radio and digital, in the podcast, video cast, even home movies that go back to the 1940s when my dad started taking them in Canada, all the way through the family's travels to California, and then all the way up in through the 80s, I think. And then I took some home movies traveling around myself. So,
well, we sure appreciate it, Phil. And I think what we'll do, Max, we're going to close it out too with your Art Bell impersonation because it's one of my favorites. But Phil, all the best, man. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've been a fan for 25 years, man. So
thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. This is a really cool. I had a good time, man, because we talked about a lot of stuff in depth. I really like that.
Anytime, and consider yourself a friend of the show. I'd sure love to visit with you again, man.
Okay, let's do it, brother.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
This morning we will be talking with General Johnson Jameson about a new planet that has been discovered by scientists at JPL and NASA. It is some kind of a discovery. And we're going to talk to General Jameson about why it's very likely there is life, living, intelligent life on that planet, much taller, much smarter than us, and with much better weapons and interstellar space travel ability. In other words, within a few years, they could be visiting our planet and consuming us as one might consume a Dorito. We will be eaten alive before the very eyes of our children by intelligent creatures from a planet far beyond the ability of our own. We'll talk about it in a moment.